As this is the fourth and the last session today, before we close our security summit, I'm very gratified to see that there is still a large, hard core of dedicated fans of security defence are still in the room. So as always, thank you for staying the course and accompanying us to the end. This last session, as you know already, is going to be devoted to the theme of innovation. We've heard a lot previously about capabilities. I worked for a Secretary General of NATO, George Robertson, who used to say that his three priorities were, you know, capabilities, capabilities, and capabilities. And of course, it's innovation that produces today and tomorrow those capabilities. I don't need to tell you, all of us having gone through the COVID crisis, which is never ending, how much we've relied upon innovation as our only hope to get out of the situation. Hopefully one day. You saw at the COP26 last week the enormous emphasis on technology as also offering a potential way out of the burning of fossil fuels. It's no exaggeration to say that the survival of the planet and therefore of the human species depends increasingly on our capacity to innovate our way out of trouble. And if that's true of the planet or of health, that's also, of course, true of defence and security. And so today we want to look at really three big questions. Are NATO and the EU up to the innovation challenge? What are they doing well? What are they getting right? What are they doing badly? Where do they need to improve? Number one. Number two, are the authoritarians out-innovating us? Or is this all a little bit of exaggeration and propaganda, and in reality, we're much better than they are? So we want to sort of look at the global scene and our rating as Europeans in that global scene. And thirdly, we've heard a lot today about how the EU and NATO need to support each other and to help each other. And Charles, when he was here earlier, mentioned, of course, the need for NATO and the EU to do more together on innovation, with NATO recognising, of course, everything that the EU was doing in that field. So how can that innovation issue be factored into this general push towards more collaboration? A strategic compass, strategic concept that we've been talking about today. Again, I'm in the fortunate position that I don't have to answer those questions. This time, instead of 5 excellent people, I've got 4 excellent people, which is no bad thing because it may mean that we might have a bit of time for some questions at the end. Let's hope. Anyway, the first person is not with us live today. I had the opportunity to interview General Philippe Lavigne a couple of weeks ago. As you probably know, he's the incoming Strategic Allied Commander Transformation out there in Norfolk, Virginia. And in NATO, therefore, the whole issue of innovation, technology, emerging disruptive technologies comes under him. So before I introduce our 3 live panelists, of whom 2 are in the room today and 1 is online, although you know who they are because they're in the program already, but I'll introduce them individually at the moment. But before we get to that, I would like to, I'm not going to do this, but my technologically capable colleagues who know how to do this will show you the brief video with General Lavigne. I get, however, to repeat the questions that I put to him on that occasion, and then you'll see how he answers those questions on the screen. So this is going to need a little bit of synchronization, but hopefully it's all going to go swimmingly. So first of all, General Lavigne, thank you for being with us today. First question, for decades, NATO prided itself on its technological lead over its potential adversaries, but does NATO still have that tech lead today, particularly vis-a-vis competitors like Russia and China? And are there areas that cause you particular concern? For instance, you know, artificial intelligence, missiles, computing, cyber. Where do you think today NATO still has the edge? So, General Lavigne, over to you.
Thank you very much, Jamie, for these these kind words and for welcoming me in this new post, which is I'm very exciting to jump, and I'm here for more than 1 month now. And of course, I'm very delighted to be connected with you and with your followers, and it's very important, I'm sure, to speak about that. That's a very good question, of course, and the thing is that we have to first start with this increasing complex world, and I think that we are in a moment where we are in a non-linear process, not only peace, then crisis, then war. We are our competitors are shaping the environment. They are competing all the days. The threats are permanent, they are boundless, and they are simultaneously used. So it's we have to manage, of course, to manage that. And of course, we have produced, as I said, concept, a war-fighting concept. War-fighting, that means that we have to shape, we have to contest, and fight if we have to do that. So this concept has promoted and promotes a proactive way of thinking and anticipating that consider all potential threats and adversary, but it is driven by our own aspiration and our own ambition of process. And of course, it promotes a more coherent and focused development of the military instrument of power. And there are two main things we have to work on. That is multi-domain operation or multi-domain integration, and of course digital or data backbone. That will be the key for the future. And what I want to say is that NATO has already ramp up in these two things and the capabilities. Of course, the first things we have to remind is that nations are putting more and more money in defense activities. So for NATO, it's great in order to get this capability delivery. We've got also to think about innovation, and of course we need more and more innovation to adapt faster, to be agile, and we need innovation, of course, coming from our societies and what we call open innovation, in order to continue to get the advantage. My concerns are, well, I've got many concerns, but I can say that particularly my concerns are about hypersonic, about quantum, and of course cognitive warfare.
John, thanks very much. Second question is, how can a NATO innovation strategy help the alliance to catch up or preserve its technological edge? Is the alliance now fully geared to handle innovation? So let's see if the connectivity works as well as it did last time round.
I was and I am still in contact with the US Force Chief General Sekou Brown, and he has got a very, very good motto, and I always share with others. His motto is accelerate, change, or lose. So we have to take into account innovation. And just to remind you that ACT jumped into this already in 2012, and we continue to develop innovation. But what innovation requires? It requires strategy, it requires plan of actions, and I think that we've got a plan of action. The plan of action is the war-fighting concept, this famous NWCC. We've got the new way of thinking the threats and to address the threats and to get these capabilities. And we have got this, and we So we've got the military requirements, and of course, innovation is integrated in this NWC. But innovation has to produce, and not only innovation, but it has to be interoperable, because innovation is going to produce tools that has to be taken into account by our armed forces. It has to be sustainable through the times, and of course it has to be deployable. That means that's our armed forces personnel has to get it in his hand and be sure that he can use it very easily. And so strategy, plan, and rocket fuel. What does it mean? Leadership commitment, and of course we've got a huge and strong commitment from our bosses in the last Brussels summit, and you all, of course, know the project of Diana. And the rocket fuel is also the user involved. We need manpower, military user into the loop. Like as I said in the last question with, for example, the Kessenroll initiative. We've got also to get the mindset. The mindset is very important. We have to be innovative. And for example, we've got this in our mind, the collaborative warfare. And collaborative warfare is something that it's very important. The new plane will not be a new plane in the future. It will be a system of systems. It will be sensors linked to platforms, linked to space, linked to multi-domain. That's the collaborative warfare. And of course, we've got also have to get this network of innovation hub of laboratories or agencies in our nation. And ACT has got his own network innovation hub, which will grow. So more innovation is needed. We can buy and adapt, and we can create and adopt.
General, thanks very much. You mentioned innovation hubs, and I specifically wanted to ask you about that because NATO announced with fanfare that at its summit in June that it was creating these innovation incubators. Does this mean a culture change for the military, more in terms of working with the private sector, civilian society, and startups?
Yes, Jamie, you are totally right. In the past, even in the recent past, it's military innovations who are feeding the civilian one, and we can have an example like GPS, internet, space, rockets and satellites, cryptology. Now, as you say, it's civilian world who is going to lead on technical innovation and on IT. So we have to take this into account. So ACT, since 2012, is increasing its ability to produce military capabilities through innovation. So we've got two types of ways. Is two ways. It's directed innovation. That means that's ACT, but not only ACT. Nations can provide questions, and of course towards the industries in order to address a point, a matter, and they have to work and to produce some solution, and so it's pushing innovation. But we have also now the ability to pool the innovation, and it is a huge necessity to be developed. It's this open innovation. And of course, ACT has developed link with private sector, but not only private sector, with academia. For example, the Old Dominion University in Norfolk, with startup and industry. And we've got, for example, Innovation Challenge at the end of November, which is led by ACT, hosted by Canada, and it will deal with the connective warfare. Of course, we will have other engagements, like for example the NATO industrial forum. It will be in Rome, and we have to embrace more innovation, to be smart enough to grow our agility, and open, of course, enough to learn about everybody, and of course allied nation. But what I want to say is that ACT is not alone, and it is why at the Brussels summit, nations have agreed to develop this innovation through Diana, and ACT is going to be a part of this innovation ramping up.
Thank you. Last question, General. We've been talking today, of course, about the new strategic concept of NATO. What do you think ACT can contribute to the work on the new strategic concept? What would you like to see come out of it from your point of view, particularly when you think of, what's in the older 2010 version?
One of the NATO's 2030 agenda priorities is to update the strategic concept, and it will be, of course, endorsed at the political level at the Madrid NATO summit in 2022. Things are still evolving, and I cannot tell you so much at this stage because strategic concept is a political document. Of course, there are discussion and there will be discussion at ambassador level. What I can say is that the Secretary General is conducting a consulting exercise through different seminars. There are 4 seminars. Then there will be a negotiation phase, and of course decision will be taken by the North Atlantic. What I want to say is that we have now the best military thinking package in a generation. We've got the DDA, which is the concept of deterrence and defense in Euro-Atlantic area, and we've got this NWCC, which is the warfighting concept. So it's bringing forward the principle of the NATO military strategy. It's a base, it's a real base for the strategic concept, of course, as a military voice in this strategic concept.
General Lavigne, thank you very much indeed for joining us today and for giving us those comprehensive answers. And we see Tony has already given us a commentary of his own on that as well. General Lavigne, thank you very much indeed, and hope we'll see you in person.
Jamie, thank you very much for this interactive question and answer and brainstorm. For me, it's very important to get this type of meeting, and I want to say a very last thing is that where NATO is more than the sum of its parts. It's of course everyone business, and it's the ability of acting together, and 1 + 1 is always more than 2. Thank you very much, Jamie.
Good message to end on. General Lavigne, again, thank you very much. Hopefully we can see him in person amongst us soon. So now we go to the panel, and as I mentioned, I'm delighted that 2 of them are with us in person today. We have Andrea Garcia Rodríguez, who's come from Barcelona. She's a research fellow at the Barcelona Center for International Affairs, but she's also been involved with some of the technology work on what Tania was talking about earlier, which is the NATO 2030 Young Leaders Project. We've got on video link Jane Frankland, who is an entrepreneur, won many awards, an author, and was nominated by UNESCO to be a trailblazing woman in technology. So Jane, delighted to have you with us today. And we have Pierre Pozzi, Rocco Belforti, Some of you may remember Pierre, if you were at the State of Europe conference a few weeks back over at the Palais d'Egmont, where he had a lot to say about innovation and the venture capital market and culture in Europe. And I'm sure for those of you who were there, you'll be interested in hearing from him again. For those of you who weren't there, you'll certainly be interested in hearing him today. He's chairman and CEO at Worldstone. So those are our three panelists. The issues are pretty well mapped out already. Andrea, I pass the microphone to you first. And of course, as you know, we're interested in hearing from you about what kind of innovation or technology should we really be looking at the future. There's often this sort of shopping list of 15 different things. And what we need to know from an expert like you is, okay, of all of these 15 different things, what are the things that really we need to be keeping our eye upon? And we've heard a lot about European strategic autonomy today, but from your point of view, what does it mean in technology innovation terms, and how self-reliant does Europe really need to be in this area? So Andrea, over to you for your 5-minute thoughts on this, and then we'll hear from Jane, and we'll hear from Pierre, and hopefully, unlike in the first panel, we'll have some time for you to ask questions before we close. Andrea, please.
Well, first of all, I would like to thank you, Jamie, for your introductory remarks and your conversation with General Lavigne, and of course, Friends of Europe for the invitation. I think this is a very remarkable event, and as far as I was able to hear from the other colleagues who have been present here today, the results are being amazing. So thank you very much for your invitation. I'm told to keep it short, and that's what I will be doing here. So as to respond to the first question, what are the technologies that we should be looking at? I'm going to agree with Mr. Lavigne in saying that, to me, the technologies that keep me up at night are basically 4: quantum computing, AI, hypersonics, and biotechnologies. And what is the reason of that? Well, first of all, as Mr. Lavigne said, General Lavigne said before, we are entering a time in which everything is hyper-connected, I may say. So we are playing in cyberspace, we are playing through cyberspace, and we are playing cyberspace itself. So with quantum computing and quantum communications and other quantum applications that may emerge, it would be like going to war with horses instead of like going there with tanks, because the capacity leap is so big that the first one who gets there, we have a strategic advantage, and that's something that we cannot, as NATO or as Europe, really understand, and that's something that we shouldn't let it happen. So as right now that we have like set this point in which cyber plays the foundations of our modern warfare, and knowing that quantum changes that foundations and increases it into almost like exponentially, those 3 technologies that I've mentioned I would like to expand a little bit further on them: AI, hypersonics, and biotech. Hypersonics will reduce let's say, the time we have to respond to threats in a moment in which responses are already a very hard task. AI will help us in reconnaissance, situational awareness, better foresight, and also like help us deliver with more precision. And we're seeing, like, for example, with drones, how precise these attacks can be. And the third one, which is biotech, I think was the fusion of war, not only with other domains such as space and cyberspace, but also to human enhancement. It's something that NATO has recognized as one of the top, let's say, technologies to look at in the future, and just covering those 3 things from the foundations of cyberspace and therefore quantum those are the 4 technologies that I think we should be looking at if we don't want to miss out on our current strategic advantage, if we have it, right? Which comes to the second question: can we even speak of a strategic advantage? Can we even speak of a strategic autonomy? In digital terms, well, we all know that strategic autonomy is a term that comes from the military doctrine. So when we speak about strategic autonomy, it means not being independent nor dependent. In how do we achieve this common ground? I think that the EU is doing a great work, and I don't want to repeat myself, and I don't want to repeat what other colleagues have said, namely, for example, like Tania Latice, which she's working on this on a daily basis. But I think in terms of technology, there is a great opportunity for cooperation happening from this year on with, for example, NATO. NATO announced the creation of NATO Diana, which is supposed to be a sort of, and I would like to hear, like, quote unquote, my own word, sort of DARPA defense, like this research agency that that in the US that they have it to find new technologies and boost these technologies and incorporate these technologies to their like military. So with that, NATO Diana opens up new opportunities of cooperation with, for example, the Defense Innovation Hub that will be created within the European Defense Agency here in Europe. So we see the collision of two fronts. The first one is certainly private sector and venture cap and civil society, and the second one that we see is the political willingness to cooperate into and stick together in a sector or in a domain that is as sensitive as the digital domain, meaning cyber and, of course, space. And I would like to bring and to give another message. I know the time is running and I need to keep it short, but I think that it would be very, very necessary for us to work with sub-state actors, because when cyber entered the conversation, we started speaking about cybersecurity and cyber resilience, but this is something that is not real for other actors such as cities and regions that do not feel themselves incorporated into this talk, and I think that recent things we have seen, for example, during the pandemic, such as cyber attacks to big cities, also get to know us, like show us that this interdependence also happening at the sub-state level. So I think that we should take into consideration that and probably like work more on integrating like other actors into our notion of security when it comes to digital, because one weak point is a weak point of entry that can escalate and infect the whole system. And inside the whole system, there is everything, including the military, because of this civil-military fusion. Militaries right now use civil applications, so I think that we should keep it as resilient and as secure as possible. Thank you, Jamie.
Andrea, thanks, and congratulations, because you managed to say an awful lot in a very structured way in under 5 minutes. I think that's unique today. Most people have needed the full 5 minutes to get there. So no, thank you, and thank you for answering the questions very directly. That was very good. You ended up talking about this sort of complex ecosystem that we have, both in terms of the threat landscape, but also in terms of the response. And that leads, I think, very nicely to Jane, who has been looking at the way in which the civilian economy, civil society develops technology. In particular, she's been looking at the gender issue, because obviously we're not going to get there if women don't play their full role and have all of their opportunities. And I would want to put the question to her, as does she think that in Europe we've got this ecosystem right now in the ability to develop technology successfully? So Jane, the virtual microphone is yours, and over to you.
Thanks so much, Jamie. It was absolutely great to hear both Philippe and Andrea, and it's so good to be here. So right now, the way that I see it is we have complex issues to solve, and the world is volatile and it is in a state of disarray. National, international, and online threats are becoming progressively integrated as our enemies develop new means to exploit vulnerabilities across borders and between cyber and physical worlds. And at a time when we have never had as much technology solutions as we do now, reports tell us that the cost of cybersecurity is up 23%, vulnerabilities are up by 20%, and over 70% are considered simplistic. Additionally, that the typical security operation is unsuccessful in predicting, detecting, blocking, or effectively remediating cyber attacks. Attackers can be on our network for 146 days or more before they're seen, and we have more threats, more costly breaches, and the speed and intensity of these attacks continue to challenge every part of our ecosystem. And certainly in the last 18 months, we have taken a battering. We've had an influx of ransomware and supply chain attacks, and deep tech is continually improving. And we know that nation states have good offensive cyber capabilities, and some are much more effective than others. So that's countries like China, North Korea, and Iran. And we also know that cyber attacks have made a significant contribution to the war against terror. Cyber is different today, and it's not just a target, it is a weapon and attack vector. And attacks are transforming from disruptive to destructive. So with all of this all of these advancing threats with more connectivity, more regulation, and workforce mobilization than ever, and a future that's still having to rely on the technologies of the past. So that's operating systems, computing, languages, software environments, which are vulnerable and are often unsupported. Are we prepared? And if not, what do we have to do? Now, for me, I say we are not ready, and I propose that we go back to basics and focus on our people and the leadership. Philippe spoke about leadership earlier. And you see, how I see it is that in security, we have always had a huge tendency to rely on technology, and often we've used it as a silver bullet to try and eliminate cyber attacks and compliance failures. And whilst we've used people to implement the technology and develop processes to support it, we've made an error. Typically, we've used the same types of people. So those who are male and those who have typically come from a military, intelligence, or STEM background, so science, technology, engineering, and maths. And unknowingly, we've recruited in our own shadows. So these are people like us, they fit in, it feels good working with them. And whilst they do worthy work, the problem of having the same types of people in our industry has limited our thinking capacity. It's limited our innovation. And so it's created this unique culture, which has made us more siloed. And that's not good, because as cyber attacks grow and become more creative and hackers become more collaborative and business-like in their approach, we really need to follow their lead. And we need what Winston Churchill coined corkscrew thinking skills. So this is where you have people who can see things in different ways. And we need that, because that enables us not to be so blindsided. We need more collaboration. We need to break the muscle memory of knowledge hoarding, because that goes on. And we need to adopt a very different mentality. And I call it a give to gain mentality. Obviously, we can't solve our problems with the same thinking we used to create them, just as Einstein pointed out. And that's why, for me, I look to women. You know, it's the area that I focus on, but it's not just about doing what's right for women. It's about doing what is right for society. And when we look at women, women do offer a strategic and a competitive advantage to business. We know that. There have been like hundreds of reports on that. We know that teams are more productive, innovative, and cost-effective compared to homogenous teams. But in security, countless studies have shown that women and men gauge risk in very different ways. And when our job is about risk management, we have to consider women. We have to do a better job of getting more women into our ecosystem, into our companies and organizations. Women are highly skilled at assessing odds, and this often manifests itself in an increased avoidance of risk. Women are typically more risk averse. They are detailed with their exploration. If something doesn't feel right, then chances are it is not right. So they pick up on the subtleties of things that are going on. And this is a skill that is needed for correctly identifying threat actors and obviously protecting environments. And the other good thing about having women on board is they don't necessarily fall for attacks that are purposely being written for men. So we need more women to come into our system. It's not that women are better than men, it's just that they're different. Men are great and tend to be fantastic with pragmatic thinking. But as I said, what matters is that no one gender is better. It's just that we're different. And when we come together, we can do a better job, we can evolve, we can solve problems faster, and we progress. So for me, I do make the case for having more diversity, specifically gender. And I also want to see us working on our leadership qualities, because I know that these are failing and we have to do a better job, and we have to start at the top with our leadership. We have to work harder, certainly if we want to attract women, because it takes longer to do that. But we have to lead in a very different way now. We have to create these psychologically safe environments that are right for all people, so that we can offer more safer solutions. We can be more creative with our thinking, and certainly we can be more happier. And when those things happen, we can prosper as a society, as a planet.
Jane, thanks very much, and thank you for pointing out that it's as much about the culture as about the specific science and the technologies and the capabilities, just like General Lavigne stressed the connectivity of things as giving you a leap forward. The people who connect things often do better than the people who invent the individual products in the first place. Thank you very much. So we got that message loud and clear. And then finally, before we go to Q&A, so we are going to have some time for Q&A, it looks like. So please start preparing your interventions now. And thirdly, it's all about business and the business culture. It's all about the finance and the investments, of course. And there's no better person than Pierre with us today to address that. Pierre, I know you've got some slides to drive your points home. So I'll move a little bit to the side so I don't impair anybody's vision. Over to you.
Thank you, Jamie. So thank you for having me tonight. First of all, a couple of points. I've been given 5 minutes, so please bear with me. I'll try to be as bullet points as I can, but there's quite a bit in there. It's quite revolutionary. Second thing, I just want to say that I'm absolutely free. I don't work for any government. I don't work for any organization. I'm just a venture capitalist, totally independent. I have my own views, and that's what I'm explaining or expressing. Third thing is I'm a true European, so I'm very worried for Europe, and we'll see why in a minute. At least that's my assessment. And the last point is what I've been asked is, to give my vision as a venture capitalist on where Europe stands. So let's start, first of all, with slide number 1. Today, we live in a cloud-centric world. And as you can see, Europe is here in the middle. Unfortunately, the laser pointed, does it work? I don't know if you can see it. You can't see it on the screen, unfortunately. But you see in the very middle, you have the European flag. Unfortunately, Europe has no cloud, has basically no platforms. So what happens is there are 450 million citizens. Basically, all their data are captured by foreign platforms. And this is a concern, in my view, a major concern. That's why platforms are dominating so much. And in two completely different systems, you have the US system, which obviously is capitalist and democratic, and then you have the Chinese system, which is obviously completely different and more autocratic. I'm not saying one is better than the other. What I'm saying is it's a fact. The second point where I'm really worried is that when you look at the arrows A and B, A is every citizen who's also a voter, but who's also a consumer, purchases services, goods, or information. And unfortunately, in exchange for that, the platforms capture all of our data. Private life, pictures, your health, everything. This is, in my view, extremely worrying. So if you look at the left column, we basically become more and more every single day data vassals. We become hacking victims. Our privacy is destroyed. Algorithms are really sovereign more and more, and it's a major problem because we don't know what the recipe of these algorithms are. Tech giants have a huge empowerment, and unfortunately, from a European point of view, we are fully dependent. Let me explain what we do and the difficulty we went through. Well, basically Europeans, and we had to go to California to make our startup, although it's a European startup, but we went much faster in California because we patented quite a revolutionary technology, which is based, basically, you use fingerprints, you use face recognition to identify yourself, but also to access any sort of application, whether it's Facebook or your bank or whatever, e-commerce, you name it, including security facilities. Now, the major problem with those technologies, all of them, they're fairly easy either to hack or to spoof or to imitate. The major risk with face recognition, I don't know if you know it, but it's not a picture of your face. It's a scan, three-dimensional scan of your face with 35,000 points taken up and updated every single time you unlock your phone. The problem is if a hacker can hack your face recognition and sell it on the dark web for $25, because every day you have quotations. For example, a fingerprint, it's about $2 to $3. Face recognition is about $25. Your native face is gone forever. You've lost it. So you do not have anymore a digital identity. You will have probably to go through plastic surgery or find another solution, which is extremely worrying. So what we've been working for in the last 5 years is a revolutionary technology based on the identification of a human through the electrical signal that the brain emits every single time that you do the movement of picking up your smartphone, or picking up your tablet, or picking up your key fob, or just opening the door handle. Every time you do this gesture, it's 1 million electrical signals, nothing to do with the thought, just electrical signals flowing from your brain, through your nerves, through your muscles, to the tips of your fingers. It's a unique signature. Cannot be falsified, cannot be spoofed, cannot be copied. And it means it's you, only you, and no one else. No machines, no robots, and nobody can falsify it. So it's a combination of these three factors. Now, the key feature about this, and this is quite revolutionary, is that it means that in real time, online, we can detect robots, which means fake profiles, because fake profiles are generated by robots. Millions of robots, what we call robot farms, around the world. So we can detect in real time bots from humans. For example, in the blockchain, you can have as many computers basically storing the same information around the world. The problem is, who tells you that at the very beginning of the chain and the very end of the other end of the chain, there are two real humans? Nobody, except if you can prove it that it's the real humans. So a number of things. We can detect liveness of a person, we can detect age and gender. All this is done in an anonymous way, in a totally cloudless way. Why? Because we don't need your name, we don't need your phone number, we don't need your face recognition, we don't need the fingerprint, we don't want any of that information. The only thing we want is that you grab your smartphone and you just calibrate it for about less than 2 minutes with your brain signal, which is absolutely anonymous. So based on this technology, what is happening today, and unfortunately we had to go to California. Why? Because in Europe it's extremely expensive to get a patent. It takes years. It told me, lawyers told me, it's going to cost double. You have to go through 3 languages. And in the US, it goes really fast. It's US, it's in English. Because we face one single market, 450 to 500 million consumers, users. So it's much more efficient. And in the US, when we introduce the request for the patent, usually it takes between 2 and 3 years. If you're very lucky in technology, we got it in 11 days. Because there's a pragmatism that we do not have in Europe. The other point that we have a problem in Europe is that we do not have a venture capital market to raise financing. It's a major problem. And when we hire skills, and you should see in California, we're absolutely diverse in the team, all ages, all origins, all gender, name it. It goes from 75 years old to 16, from all over the world. They're really fast, bright, and the good thing is we can organize stock options for them. Whether they come from Texas or they come from God knows where or Canada, it's the same regime, tax-wise, once they become resident. In Europe, it's not the case. If you go to Germany, or you set up your startup in Belgium, or you do it in France, totally different legal settings. So that is also a major problem. That's why we do not have a unified market in Europe. So let me move basically to what is happening here, is that with your brain electrical signal, you control your whole environment, everything. Because basically you can also, through your brain signal, you can encrypt every information that you send out. So you get to the point where through your neuroprint, you basically you can control cybersecurity, military intelligence, private and public infrastructure. You can, go through your platforms. The only thing that your phone or your tablet says is the device is in the hands of the legitimate owner. Full stop. It doesn't say whether it's Pierre, Mary, Mohammed, it doesn't matter. It's not a woman or a man, it's just the legitimate owner, which is, quite revolutionary. So if I look at where we stand today, because this is one of the questions that I was asked to say, but what about, Europe, the European Union, where do we stand in technology? Well, I'm extremely worried, because when I look at the 17 main sort of characters or main items or main strategic points, we're entering to what I call a techno-strategy world. It's extremely worrying. If you look at the list, unfortunately the pointer doesn't work on the screen, but if you look from 1 to 17, and you look USA, I put it in green, all the yes, they tick all the boxes, mostly, with the exception of the very last one, because that's where the EU has a strategic advantage in legislation. If you look at China, they still do not have yet the airlift projection capabilities, but they'll get to there one day, but otherwise they tick basically all the columns with the exception of the last 2. Look at Russia, where they stand, and then look at the European Union. Look at the last 3 points. From 15 to 17, we're very good. We're excellent at moral values, at saying, you know, this is the way things should be done, etc. But unfortunately, and I see it in the Silicon Valley. Before COVID, I used to fly there every couple of months. We have our team there, 25 people. When I queue up in a coffee bar, I hear speaking French, Spanish, German. You know, most of our best brains are going over there. And unfortunately, for the time being, European Union is still number 2 in the world. Patents, for example, on AI, but we're going to be overtaken. And so will be the US by China, because that's their target. Now, what I did is I added on the comment, on the column where you have the comments, basically which countries in Europe have some semblance, as you say in French, some sort of a policy towards those items. Well, I get very worried. And then I look at point 16 and 17. Well, the European Union is the world leader in democratic values. That's fantastic. But I can tell you, we're becoming the vassals. We are going to be, quote unquote, colonized by artificial intelligence and data. So let me conclude here where we stand. That's at least my point of view. Remember, on the left-hand side, you see what President Putin and President Xi have said. The nation that leads in AI will be the ruler of the world. Well, let me tell you, and let me give you an example. Data, on the right side, data is the fuel of AI. Computation of data is basically for AI, is basically the carburetor of the engine, like a car. Algorithms are the drivers, the brakes, and the accelerators. AI today is uncontrolled, unregulated, like raw material available in nature. Any sort of terrorist or any sort of rogue state or any sort of independent, you know, brain that has some ability to use the power in the cloud and computational power can come up with AI that can be very dangerous. AI, it will overtake nuclear weapons in 20 years. Why? Because nuclear weapons can destroy and kill. You don't need to destroy and kill with AI. You go from the inside when you don't master the cloud. And I'm finishing there. So we philosophate on values, we regulate, but we never control afterwards. That's a major problem. We generally provide brains and skills and patents, but in my view, if we carry on like this, in 20 years, the EU will be out of G5. Not EU as a bloc. If we remain as a bloc and we go further in trying to unify further, we might still be in G5, group of 5 richest and most influential countries. Otherwise, we're lost. And that's what I think we are really not only losing today our world position, but we're losing our sovereignty. Thank you.
Thank you, Pierre. No, fascinating stuff, and slides very effective, particularly your 17 key categories. That's extremely sobering. Pierre, Tony has tried to sum up what you said in one single image of the snail's pace of the European Union. But no, I mean, good news in the sense that you suggested technological solutions that could get the human being back into the centre, but then the sobering news in terms of where the EU is falling behind. And this is not just about economics. You presented the geopolitical stakes in all of this in a very alarming but way. But you came to inform us, not to entertain us. That's clear. Thank you. We still have 10 minutes left, which is a miracle. Chris Cremides was the first person, followed by a gentleman behind him. Stand up, please, Chris, ask your question so that we can capture on camera.
Thank you.
And of course, Chris, if it's to a specific individual, please indicate that.
Thank you, Jamie. Great to be back with you all. Chris Cremides, Courtney from Friends of Europe. Fascinating discussion and a great way to finish the day. And I really want to thank Pierre for setting up my question so well, because I had it prior to seeing your slides. When we look into the future, and I'm stealing a little bit from what I'll talk about at the dinner tonight, but when we look into the future and see that the EU's influence as a normative power is largely reliant on leading in certain industries, leading in the auto industry, aerospace and certain things. When we look 10 years into the future, it doesn't look quite so bright for the EU to be leading in those technology areas, which makes it's hard to be a normative power when you don't lead on those technologies. And what we constantly hear from the private sector is that the venture capital ecosystem within the EU is not up to task. It's not sufficient to task. And as you rightly pointed out, so many young entrepreneurs, young scientists who create some new technology here in Europe, they decamp to California or Vancouver or somewhere like that to really realize their dreams. So my question is, how can we make the venture capital ecosystem of the EU fit to purpose so the EU can remain competitive technologically into the future.
Okay, Chris, thank you very much. Before Pierre, I ask you to reply, Pierre, what we'll do is we'll go to the gentleman behind you, and then I think we have, a question from the online audience. So we'll take those three, have a quick round of responses from our three panelists, and then hopefully we may have time for a second round.
Thanks. I'm going to follow in the same vein. Costas Dervenis, I'm a senior executive for an IT firm. You can't make a dinner if your dishes are dirty. Somebody has to wash the dishes, okay? Venture capital is a very good thing. At the moment, there are 3.5 million open cybersecurity positions around the world. There are another 3 million software engineer and network engineer positions open. Speaking of incentives, have the member states of the EU/NATO considered providing institutional incentives to IT companies, to students, to businesses in order to increase the number of engineers and technologists? Because if you don't have the people, you're not going to innovate, you're not going to move forward. Yeah. So tax incentives, these type of institutional incentives, are they being considered by the EU member states, by the NATO member states?
Excellent question. Before you worry about them going to California, you need to have them in the first place, right? Very good point. So we now go to the online audience.
Thanks, Jamie. I would like to invite Liga Rosenthal, who is Director of EU Government Affairs at Microsoft, specialized in cybersecurity.
Okay, hopefully on screen. But please go ahead.
Yes, I'm on screen.
Ah, fantastic.
And I hear you very well. Hi, Jamie. I'm very sad not to be in Brussels today, but I'm joining you from the NATO Industry Forum, where also General Lavigne is at. And I'd like to maybe provide a question, but first comment on the different discussion within the NATO context and the EU context, which I think is a bit of the elephant in the room that no one's willing to necessarily identify. I think the two different organizations, if you talk in a transatlantic sense, it's very optimistic about building and working on innovation together, but on the EU side, it's quite a bit different. And I think at the core of these issues is certainly the discussion on data and data localization. And once we get this worked on and solved in clarity, then I think that we can move ahead on innovation, and certainly that applies to the military sector as well. I think I also wanted to provide a point on the slide provided on cloud providers, which I think is a bit unfair towards putting the US and the Chinese providers on an equal footing. We follow very different values and a different business model, and also among American cloud providers, we have significantly different approaches to the use of data. And I just wanted to identify the EU data boundary that Microsoft announced that takes into consideration the serious European positions on where data should be stored and localized, while we take a long-term view on providing solutions that are that meet these challenges and put data in the hands of Europe so that it could have the economic advantages of that data. We're certainly committed to that. Just maybe a question that I could address back to the panel is,
yep, go ahead, Lee.
Looking at these authoritarian regimes, and are they outcompeting democracies? My question is, are democracies working together to outperform authoritarian regimes? As I said, there's different legislative frameworks. There's a different approach to privacy. How can we work better as democracies together, given the opportunities we have through the Trade and Tech Council, the EU-US Cyber Dialogue, and now the very positive step last week that the EU and the US both endorsed the Paris call for trust and stability in cyberspace. Thanks.
Thanks for joining us. See you back in Brussels soon, and enjoy the NATO Industry Forum. You asked lots of questions. We got quite a lot of material there. So I go first to you, Pierre. Brief answers, if you don't mind, because then we can have another round.
Yeah.
And then I'll go, of course, to Andrea. Andrea, you want to come in first?
Yes, I wanted to come first because I also wanted to respond to Pierre. So if I come first, then he can reply to the questions first.
Then that is perfectly legit. So Pierre, hold your fire. Andrea, you first. Pierre, and then bring in Jane also on those questions.
Well, to respond to Liga, I'm very optimistic about the Trade and Technology Council, but I'm optimistic, and I quote myself here because I don't want to be too optimistic. And I think that that some developments are on the table, and just like looking at the declaration that was recently released in terms of, like, for example, trustworthy AI. That's one of the things that I think that this two packs of democracies are looking into. Each of them has a different, of course, flavor. So that's the flavor that we've seen in the AI Act proposal here in Europe, but also the National AI Initiative in the US also speaks about trustworthy AI. So I think there's like points there, although we should probably like do more work to put together our efforts to counter global things such as, for example, the digital Silk Road that the Chinese are putting forward. And to Pierre, which is the thing that I wanted to say, I wrote down the 4 things that you were saying. That the EU does not have its own cloud, that is not a master of their data, no integrated defense, and no internet. Well, in terms of integrated defense, the European Union is an economic union, so it cannot have an integrated defense as of now. So I think that that's unfair that it appears they're at the same level as the rest. As all of the clouds, well, Gaia X is happening. I don't really know if it's going to happen. That's probably like the key for another discussion. Master of our own data, I think the GDPR kind of allows us to speak about that. And the industrial policy of the EU is like trying together with industrial data clusters that companies can use to innovate. And on own internet, I want to bring in the quantum thing. Like the EU is working really hard to create this Euro QCI network, which will be a network of quantum internet connecting like different things. So I think that as of now, this might be the picture, although a little bit exaggerated under my point of view. But I think that we should be a little bit more optimistic.
Okay, so Pierre, you're getting some pushback, and the question, of course, which I was going to ask is, does the EU ability in regulation, like the General Data Protection ruling, compensate for the EU's lack of maybe the hard technical capabilities? Anyway, so thank you, Andrea. So Pierre, now you go quickly to answer all of the arrows that have been directed at you.
Thank you,
and then we go to Jane.
Yeah, okay. So let me first answer on the venture capital and IT, colleague here. 2 things. First of all, what we're missing really in Europe is, first of all, a common platform from from a financial point of view in financial markets, and from a tax point of view, because as I said earlier, when you invest in France, different taxation than in Belgium or Netherlands or Italy or whatever, so it's very complicated. So it's very difficult to attract talents from other countries because they are resident maybe somewhere else, but they work remote. I mean, it's a bit of a nightmare. The second point is we do not have the mentality of venture capitalists, which is that when we hire young chaps, 16, 17, 28, even 65, whatever, they get stock options. And unfortunately, they're very motivating and they're prepared to work day and night. It's a totally different approach. We do not have that approach yet in Europe. Second point about IT and NATO and whether, countries, the problem we have in Europe, that's at least my assessment, is that unfortunately we reason on a national basis. So you go to France, you go to Spain, and then what happens is when the EU decides or tries to come up with some sort of joint program, you have endless bargainings going on for months, maybe sometimes a couple of years, maybe some projects take at least 4 years before they can take off, because we start saying, yeah, okay, the production facility should be there, but the IT should be there in another country, so we need to share the cake, and it's extremely complicated. So it gets me to the last point, again, in a very pragmatic way. You know what a cooperative society is. Every single member, you can have 300,000 members of a cooperative society, all decisions have to be taken with every single member of the cooperative society taking a decision. Imagine if overnight IBM, Microsoft, or Mercedes-Benz or Daimler, instead of being a PLC or an Inc. With shareholders and a majority shareholder and shareholders that can vote, imagine if they become a cooperative company. It's absolutely unmanageable. It will be a mess. Well, that's what the European Union is today. Unfortunately, we need unanimity on strategic decisions. That's a major problem that we have. My personal thinking is that in the coming 10 or 20 years, we'll get so many pushbacks and we'll be left so much behind by the Americans and the Chinese that we'll end up with a two-tier Europe. It's a debate, I'm very provocative, but that's where, unfortunately, I think we're going to end up. Last point about Gaia, and I fully agree with you. I was very hopeful about Gaia, and then when I heard that it was opened to non-European players, I'm worried. I'm worried because I don't know why we should allow international firms that are not based in Europe, that we do not control one way or the other from a legislative point of view, that they should join a purely European program, because then we're losing again, in my view, our sovereignty. And a very last comment about the platforms, which was made by our colleague from Microsoft. Of course, I was not talking about values. I was talking about the markets and the way they are. The reality is our consumers, our voters, our citizens are losing their data, and they're going to US and going to China, regardless of what the systems are. That's the reality of what we have today. So unfortunately, I don't think we're going in the right direction. Last point, it's up to us to explain to our politicians and our decision makers what is required and what do we need to do to be able to compete in the coming 20 years. We have the best brains, we have all the money, but we're not able to convert them into competitive advantages besides legislation. We do have some niches where we're very good at, but unfortunately they're not good enough to be able to, quote unquote, dominate worldwide from an economic point of view.
Okay, Pierre. You defended yourself robustly. And so, Jane, and again, thanks for your patience, but then you get the last word, Jane, so take full advantage.
Okay. Thanks so much. See, I don't see that we're losing our data because we do have laws like the GDPR, so we are doing something about it. We're not, so I don't think that we're losing it. We may not be in control of it. Other countries are, like the US or China and so on, but it's complicated. So even if we were to reverse engineer and see what California has done in terms of VCs and innovation and things like that, as a European Union, there are many countries involved. So it's not just one. If we pick one country, then it would be a lot easier to do that. And maybe we should start with one country in Europe and try and make it easier and offer more incentives. You know, I'd definitely like to see at least one country trying to do that. I'd also like to see more of the countries working together to make the process easier. And as for the trust, the incentives in the EU, so tax incentives, one of the questions was about, we've got 3.5 million jobs open and things like that in cyber. I'm not aware of any tax incentives that are being offered to any of the companies out there. What the struggle with the companies out there in order to actually take on board talent is that they want ready-made talent, so they're not prepared to wait for that. And that's the biggest issue that we have. We need to speed up the whole process. And there are many things that can be done. The talent is out there. We need to hire it in a better way, and we can use technology to remove bias and everything like that and help us to stop missing appropriate, capable people that could be right for our industry. And then we need to set them up for success. We need to onboard them and develop them as fast as we can. And there are ways to do that, but there isn't the appetite there. So it is complicated, and there are things that can be done. But I know that we are out of time now, and I want to respect everyone's time. So I've really enjoyed it, and that's my kind of like final comment on today's event.
Jane, thanks very much. And we are out of time. The reward, of course, for the hardcore that remain to the end is always the cocktail reception. Although you didn't wait to the end just for that. You're made of sterner stuff. I know that very well. So let me just wrap things up. Obviously, as always, my concluding thoughts, which I know that you're desperate to hear. I think we've learned that we need to focus on certain things in particular. We need leadership from the top. We need to create a regulatory culture which moves at the speed and with the flexibility of the market and of innovation. Otherwise, we are going to fall behind. We need to give industry a clear regulatory environment, so it needs to know what's coming. We need to work on the overall ecosystem and use all of the talent. So I must confess, as a student of Winston Churchill, I think I've read virtually every biography written on him, at least recently. I'd never heard that corkscrew thinking skills, which is fantastic. So Jane, thank you so much for teaching me that. And particularly when it comes to gender. We've learned that skills are important and we need to develop them. No sense lamenting all of the people who go to California if they're not being formed and skilled in the first place. But there is, and Jane I think mentioned this, there's this difficult balance that industry needs to face between having the fully fledged product but being prepared to take people on with talent and training them up as well. connecting things is important, and the people who do the connections are often the winners, not the people who always do invent the product in the first place. And finally, yeah, this is about geopolitics, not just about our convenience of our daily lives or about the economy. We need to be wide-eyed about the geopolitical consequences. It's good to have programs, but we also need to keep an eye on what's going on in the here and now. So thank you, dear panelists. I thought it was a really good end to the day, and we kept the energy level up, and I think the quality of the debate right to the end. And so the final thanks is to the audience. Can't have a conference without an audience, right? And so thank you to all of you for being here today. I'm very encouraged that so many of you turned out in these difficult times. So as always, thanks a lot. Stay safe. Come back next year. And in the meantime, let's have a well-earned drink together and a useful networking half an hour or so where you can ask the speakers the questions that I did not give you the opportunity, alas, to ask in the session. But thanks a lot. Finally, of course, Eleanor and our team in Peace, Security and Defence. They're the people who make this happen. We are just, people like Chris, Paul and I, as the senior fellows, we are just la crème sur la tarte, the people who really do the work, Eleanor and the team in PSD, and those from Friends of Europe who volunteered to come along and help today, to welcome you and put it all together. So could I ask you please to give Eleanor, worked very hard on the team, a round of applause.